After a fairly minimal start to the year in my January and February bullet journal setups, I'm ready to sink my teeth into something a bit more involved for March. I'm talking maximal, moody, and inspired by the moon. Hi, it's Erin, and I'll take any excuse to set up a celestial-inspired bullet journal theme. So when I heard that Jashi Corinne's community is hosting a challenge for March around the theme Under the Stars, I knew immediately that I was getting involved. I wanted the March heading on my cover spread to be the focal point, and I always have such a good time in my reading journal trying to copy the font styles of the books that I love, the fantasy books usually, so I thought I would combine those two ideas and put together something really interesting for my March header. I went looking for celestial fonts online and I found this one called Le Tarot, and that is what I have used as my inspiration here, although I have added a few of my own flourishes to make it extra bold. I'm working in my TIEFOSSI Song Brocade A5 journal here, which is my bullet journal for the first half of 2025. And I'm using a Pentel brush sign pen in black for all of this detailing because I really feel like I can get the most control over my line with this marker more than any other. Both of these items, as well as anything else that I use in this setup, are linked in the description in case you want to get your hands on them. And if they are no longer available, I'll try to find you a decent alternative too. March marks the beginning of autumn for us here in Australia, so I do feel like this theme and this setup idea are coming at a really good time for me here in the Southern Hemisphere. But truly, a celestial theme is really a year-round kind of great idea, as far as I'm concerned. My original plan for this lettering was to make it a really shiny gold or silver, which if I'm planning to do that in my journal, I'll typically go for watercolor or paint markers. But this time I really wanted to up the ante of the shininess, and so I was thinking embossing powder, which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. I had attempted heat embossing in a journal once before and I didn't really have much luck, but I didn't know what I was doing, so I took Renee Day's Emboss Like a Boss class on Skillshare and it got me a lot closer to the effect I wanted. It still wasn't quite what I envisioned. I think maybe journal paper just isn't the right medium for heat embossing, but even though I didn't end up embossing my titles in this setup, now I have this cool crafty avenue to explore in other areas of my life, like maybe personalized birthday cards or even personalized journal covers in the future maybe. Skillshare, where I took this embossing class, is the largest online learning community for creatives and the first place to turn when there's something you want to learn. They have thousands of classes led by industry experts across everything from embossing, obviously, to film and illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. I've personally taken Skillshare classes on interior design and calligraphy, watercolor painting, embroidery, sewing, productivity, selling on Etsy, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. My journals are very much part of a creative practice for me, and having a monthly journal theme to set up works really well for me because I always know I'm going to make some time to make something and flex my creative muscle every single month. If you're a monthly themed journaler like me, or if your creative juices flow in a different direction, Skillshare is all about making the choice to learn and grow. If that's a choice you're making for yourself this year too, I have great news for you. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Now let's get back to my March cover spread. I love including a quote on my cover spread, and I also love when that quote ties into the theme in some way, so I went hunting online and I found this one from William Shakespeare. It reads, "It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves," which is kind of how I feel. I think Cassius says it in Julius Caesar, and it really resonates with the way I'm trying to live my life in 2025, so that's going on the page. I'm just hand lettering that with the same brush pen that I used for the March header, but in a bit more of a modern calligraphy style. I'm splitting the quote up so that part of it will go in the top left corner of the spread and the rest will go down in the bottom right corner, but because I have deliberately placed my March header a little bit towards the right, I'm making sure I've got more of the text above and in the top left than below and in the right, so that things still feel kind of balanced across the spread. I'm happy with those essential pieces down on the spread, so let's start adding some decoration as well. This washi tape looks like classified ads from a vintage newspaper. I got this one from Paper Monogatari, and I'm placing this one next to strips of itself so that it kind of takes on the feeling of being a solid piece of paper or similar. And once I'm happy with the blocks of these that I have down, I'm going to tear along the edges so that it really looks like this is all one piece of something. If you want to get a piece of washi tape to tear from a particular point, I always recommend giving it a little nip with your scissors first so that it doesn't need too much encouragement. So I'm making sure that each time I tear a piece, when I start the next piece of washi tape, I'm nipping it right where the last one ended. I absolutely love that it looks like I've decorated these pages with some sheets from an old newspaper now. It's such a good effect. Even though this one came from a bookshop collection, so most of the text on that washi tape is about books, the fact that the text is quite small means it doesn't really grab your eye. It's more of just a solid block of something rather than something your eye wants to read. So it doesn't really matter that it doesn't tie into my celestial theme. I'm planning to layer quite a lot of things over the top, and I was also thinking I'd be doing a lot of stamping, but the stamps that I wanted to use with this setup didn't work so well with my paint markers, and I really didn't feel like messing around with ink pads for this one, so I just kind of left the stamping idea behind. Something I did really want in this setup was a lot of contrast though. I wanted those deep, deep blacks, comparing with the bright white of the page. I have a thicker and a thinner black washi tape with some gold embossing of stars and planets and moons across both of them, so those are going to feature quite heavily. And I'm using quite a few of the tapes from the Notebook Therapy Lunar Mystery washi tape set as well. I decided at this point I wanted my lettering to have something a little bit different going on, so I'm using the bullet tip of the Ardex gold paint marker. I have used this particular gold paint marker to death. There are quite a few in the set, but this one's my favorite. And I'm just adding a little kind of dot dash broken line in the thicker areas of my lettering to give them some extra dimension. Unfortunately, the brush tip on this marker has gone really fuzzy and fluffy, and so I can't really use that end of this one anymore. When I want a brush tip gold marker, I have to use a different pen, but the bullet nib end still works really well. And these circle stickers are from a sheet from Sticky. They're kind of giving abstract moon, so I thought they would do the job here well. This cover spread is one of those cases where you could really just keep going on it forever. I had to just sort of pick a point to stop and be like, that's where we're going to end. I considered coming back in and splattering some gold watercolor paint and decided against that. I thought about drawing lots of tiny stars, but in the end I decided to leave it where it was and carry on. We're moving on to the calendar spread now, and this is a pretty standard calendar layout for me where I kind of just draw the month into a grid, but I'm adding an extra row on the left side of each of my columns this time, and that's where I'm going to put the initial and the number for each day of the month on the side instead of on the top, which is where I would usually place it. I toyed with the idea of making the spaces for calendar planning for the month circular with a kind of crescent moon shape to the side of them to put the initial and the number, and this is kind of where the idea came from. It's a very simplified, squarified version of that. I think a circular calendar would be a really cool effect. I just did not feel like putting in the time to work out how to do it in my journal this month. I wanted those spaces for the initial and the number for each day to be in gold, so I needed to use a brush marker to do that, which means I've switched to the gold marker from my Artistro metallic paint pens instead of the Ardex ones because it has a really good brush tip on it that hasn't frayed yet. And the great thing about acrylic paint markers is that you can go over the same spot and the color won't change in the way that a water-based marker like the Tombow would. You know how it gets more saturated if you have to go over a particular area more than once? Not really the case with the paint markers, they just kind of stay the color that they were. I added the initial for each day of the week along the top of the calendar so it's clear which column is for Mondays and Tuesdays, and I did that in the same font that I used for the heading on the cover spread too. Unfortunately, I missed that. The file corrupted. I'm having a lot of trouble with that lately, trying to get it sorted, so please bear with me while I do that. And I'm using the 03 Sakura Pigma Micron to add the number for each day of the month right on top of the gold. I feel like these pens go really well over the top of paint markers, so I always reach for them for this. I also didn't want that Monday the 31st sitting at the bottom of the calendar in a row all of its own, so I've just wrapped it around to the top row so it's in line with the first and the second. I made the calendar boxes 5 dot grid spaces wide and 5 dot grid spaces tall this time, including that gold row for the number, so I still have plenty of space on the top and bottom, right and left sides of the spread to add some decoration. And I love the silvery moon PET tape, so I'm really trying to make sure that I give it a chance to shine on every spread. Keeping with the vintage aged paper kind of idea that we used on the cover spread, I'm busting out this washi tape I haven't had a chance to use yet. This one's also from Paper Monogatari, but it's from the Pumpkin Spice collection. I didn't feel like I had quite enough room on this spread to add the brown washi tape that I used on the cover, the newsprint kind of styled one, so this is my way of staying consistent and having the same elements repeat so that things feel very harmonious across the spreads, without necessarily having to always use the same items in the same way each time. We're on to my next spread now, and this one actually has a different purpose for the left page versus the right page. The left page is kind of a goals and working on kind of situation, so I have a space to write down my goals, some things I'm excited for, and the things that I'm focusing on working on for the month of March. I've included this same spread with the same purpose in the last 2 months worth of setups, and it's worked really well for me. I'm just varying the layout the tiniest little bit this time by essentially dividing the page into 6 spaces and alternating which of those spaces my planning goes in versus my decoration. The last couple of times I set this up, I just did the decoration all on one side with my planning space kind of indented from there, and that was really nice. I just felt like we could mix it up a little bit this time, you know? It's not actually affecting the function at all, it's just a slightly different way to decorate. And because I haven't decorated in small spaces like this so far yet in this setup, my rule of thumb here is to have some brown text washi of some sort, something black to give it some contrast, and definitely a moon sticker in every space. There will be more sections like this later on in the setup, so it was really good to have this worked out quite early on. I still hadn't totally let go of the idea of the stamps, but this one doesn't work so well with paint marker. It works really, really well with the VersaFine ink pad, but I just didn't want to get that in there this time, so that's okay. That stamp is from Cora Crea Crafts, in case you were wondering, but I do have plenty of other black elements that I can use to bring in some texture, so not to worry. The facing page is the home of my habit tracker for this month, and I have worked out over the past 7, almost 8 years of bullet journaling that 6 habits on a habit tracker is the sweet spot for me. Any more than that and it's overwhelming, any less than that and I will think of something halfway through the month that I want to track and I haven't set myself up space for it. So this seems to be where I live. I'm adding my habit trackers as 6 tiny little calendars this time, essentially 2 columns of 3 trackers, and I've positioned them a little bit lower on the page to allow plenty of room for a nice big bold habit tracker heading in that same font that I used back on the cover spread, because I wanted to make sure that that appeared throughout quite a few times. Once I've got that all lettered out in black, I'm going to add some gold accents to it again, just like we did back on the cover spread. My freehand translation of this is definitely not as neat as it could be if you printed this kind of heading, but I actually really like how organic it is when I've done it freehand, and it's excellent practice too. I like to copy this kind of font in my reading journal quite often, so it's just something I really enjoy. If you really like the look of it, but you were going for something with a little bit more perfection than this, then absolutely you could print this with a thermal printer or your home inkjet printer if you have one, and get a much more sleek effect. But for me, I'm completely okay with a bit of imperfection, so I'm going to stick to my hand-drawn version. You can see here how worn out the brush tip is on my Art-X marker, so switching back to the Artistro one to add a gold bar above every one of the habit trackers. This is where I'll write down what the habit is that I'm tracking in those spaces, and then we can decorate. Obviously, I don't have a huge amount of space left for decoration, so I'm going to really limit it to the bottom of the page and a little bit on the left and right sides. I didn't want this to end up super overwhelming, so that's going to be enough for this one. These 2 pages are complete, so let's turn the page and work on the content planner. This was actually not supposed to be the next spread in this setup. I completely forgot my routine spread, which I've been loving using, and I didn't realize until I was editing this video that I'd actually missed it for this setup, so that's a little frustrating. I will likely add it in somewhere else in the journal. It obviously won't go where I would have placed it within the setup, but as long as it's still usable, that's okay. If you want to see what I'm talking about, you can check out my January or February Plan With Me videos so you can see what I mean by my routine spread, but never mind the routine spread, we're going straight onto content planning. And I'm starting this time with my big heading at the top that's still in that Letaro font. I'm essentially a full-time content creator now, which is fantastic, and it does mean that I need to put quite a bit of effort into planning my content for YouTube, which is exactly what this spread is for. And because I post twice a week to YouTube, I like to have a box for each of the videos I'm going to post across the course of the month, all on one page so I can really plan out where things are going, which videos will have sponsorships attached, how much time I need to allow for things, that kind of thing. This is a really useful spread for me. I also plan out my content quite far in advance on my Google Calendar. It has its own calendar so I can see it in a different color and everything. Those are for things that are getting moved around still that are a bit further in the future. Hopefully by the time it makes it to this spread in my journal, those things are pretty well locked in. I used to set this up as a full calendar, but I really only post to YouTube on the same days every week, which is Tuesday night / early Wednesday morning my time, and Friday evenings, although I am thinking about making that early Saturday mornings, we'll see. But because I don't actually need the whole month on a calendar, instead I'm just doing a box for each Tuesday and a box for each Friday. And I make it Tuesdays, even though technically the video goes live on a Wednesday. In my local time, it would be Tuesday for a lot of you watching, I think. But calling it Tuesday in my calendar, even though it's technically Wednesday for me, really helps because it makes me feel like I need to get the video ready on or before the Tuesday, you know, rather than staying up really late and still editing it at 2 a.m, which I have done before but don't want to do again. On that, I am actually taking the second half of February off, so I won't be posting videos for the second half of February. I'll have this one, I'll have a vlog coming up on Tuesday, and then I won't have anything else for the rest of February. I didn't take any time off over Christmas and New Year's. I kept posting through that. And even when I went on holidays back in October, I pre-scheduled all the content to go up in that time. I just need a little rest. So I'm going to take the rest of February off and I will be back in March bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So thanks for being patient with me. In order to keep things feeling consistent, I'm mirroring the setup of the calendar that we did a few pages ago and adding the space for the name and the number for each day on the left side in its own little gold box that goes kind of vertically. I turned the book so I could letter those names of the days on a bit more effectively, but it's very confusing. When the book is up the correct way, Tuesday on the top row and Friday on the bottom row makes perfect sense, but once you turn it on the side like this, it feels really strange writing them that way, so I really had to stop and think and compare this with a calendar as I was going, but I managed to not make any mistakes there, so that's lucky. I ran into something on this spread that doesn't usually happen to me, and that is that the space above the content header here wasn't enough room to put one of my existing elements, but it felt like I needed something there to pull the page together, so I added a gold line and a black line, and I went, you know what? That'll do. We're about to have a visit from my kitty cat Peaches. She really enjoys chewing on washi tape, this little one. The spread that we're working on now is the first of my weeklies for March, and this is where I'm going to do all of my day-to-day planning, lists of to-dos and event reminders and notes about things that happen on that day that I might want to remember in the future. All of that stuff goes here. I really live in my weekly spreads. They are the ones that get used the most, so I always like to try to make sure I'm leaving myself plenty of room, although there are definitely weeks where I just don't pick up my journal, so not every weekly gets used, and I've come to terms with that. This weekly layout is basically the equivalent of the goals, excited for, and working on page that we set up earlier, except instead of dividing the page into 6 boxes, I'm dividing it into 8 instead. And somehow I did not realize when I was setting this up that I wrote Saturday in the Sunday space. I only noticed that while editing, and it's really annoying me now, so don't worry, I will fix that, but I haven't fixed it in this video. Sorry if it's annoying you, it's annoying me too. Just like we did for the goals page earlier, I'm trying to make sure that each one of my decoration spaces has something brown represented in it, has something black represented in it, and has something with a moon on it without kind of having all of the black kind of way towards one side of the page or anything like that. So I'm trying to achieve balance by making sure that there's a little bit of these different elements really scattered across the spread. And if you love a weekly layout like I do, feel free to come and join me on one of my weekly setup live streams. I like to try to get on live and set up the rest of my weeklies for the month with you guys planning along with me, so I believe YouTube will tell you about them when I schedule them if you have turned on notifications, but don't quote me on that. My Page Majors and Jubilant Journals level channel members also get a notification on Discord in the announcements channel over there when I schedule a live, although it looks like I've just posted the video, so sometimes that's confusing. Sometimes I just forget to announce it as a post on my community tab, so sorry about that when I do forget. I think if you have notifications turned on, YouTube will tell you. Let's try that. And of course, if you do miss the live, you can always catch up on it later if you want to, and I have many previous weekly spread lives in case you're looking for something like that to plan along with right now. I wanted some gold on this spread, so I'm grabbing my ruler and just adding a little line next to each of the weekly headers there. Still can't believe I put Saturday in the Sunday space, but there you go. And I love these tiny little kind of stamp stickers that are from the Notebook Therapy set. They've been across most of my other spreads, so I have to make sure there are some represented here as well. Once we approach the level of chaotic that I am looking for, that means we are done with the March setup in my bullet journal. Let's take a little start to finish flip through so you can see how it all works together. Thank you so much to Jashi Corinne and Shah over in Jashi's Discord, who are hosting this lovely Celestial March challenge. It is so much fun. Thank you for allowing us all to be part of it. And thank you for watching all the way to the end of this video. Please make sure you leave me a moon in your comment below if you made it all the way to the end. Are you doing a celestial theme for March too? Let me know, but just in case you're not, here are some other ideas. At the top is a cute March mushroom theme in last year's mystery journal, and below that is one from the archives. This was March 2023 in my bullet journal, and it's a good one for those of you coming into spring. Bold, but still really easy.